Dame i gospodo, srdačan pozdrav, ladies and gentlemen, greetings. I'm very happy to see you in numbers at this session that is organized by the Geneva Center for Democratic Control of Armed Forces. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists for being with us. We have an hour and a half. I'm very happy we are starting on time. We have an hour and a half, and I will introduce briefly the session. I will introduce the panelists and give them some guiding questions. I would then take some questions from the floor so that we can engage a bit in a dialogue and debate about this important issue. I think as an introduction, I had an introduction which I had to drop yesterday because we had the Serbian Prime Minister, Madam Brnabić, speaking in a session yesterday morning, and basically she introduced the topic. She addressed the whole issue of e-government in Serbia and that being a government's priority. She clearly said that the goal of Serbia is to increase efficiency and transparency in governance services as a way of engaging in a public administration reform effort. She also emphasized that one of Serbia's key priorities is to build cybersecurity capacities. Indeed, strong cybersecurity capacities within government institutions as well as in the private sector are crucial to ensure that new services are resilient to disruption and that citizens would trust them and engage with them. The same policy orientation towards e-governance, which has been so clearly proclaimed and is pioneered in Serbia, will inevitably become a more explicit element of the reform agenda in all the countries of the Western Balkans. During 2016, we have witnessed an increase in the number of large-scale cyber attacks, paralyzing governmental services in developed and developing countries alike. Every breach risks eroding the trust of citizens in their government's ability to provide security and services. And this makes it ever more important to build institutions that ensure resilience to threats emanating from cyberspace, which, as you all know, is not a straightforward, but rather a very complex endeavor. Cybersecurity in of itself is complex, borderless. Challenges require national cross-border communication, cross-sectoral communication and cooperation, and quick and efficient international engagement. As a contribution to launching this discussion in the region, DCAF is pleased to organize this session and present the experiences from 3 countries, Serbia, the United Kingdom, and Estonia, to inform the debate and to see what the rest of the region can learn from these developments. I have an hour and a half, as I said, and I will try with our speakers to address 3 topics. The first will broadly talk about the importance of keeping government networks safe as a prerequisite for development of e-governance and as a prerequisite for securing the trust of citizens in services. The second series of questions will talk about the development of institutional infrastructure at the national level in the area of cybersecurity and about the role of security ministries, security agencies in doing so nationally. And the third series of questions will address an important dimension, which is that of international cooperation in cybersecurity. Now, I will proceed directly by introducing the panel. We have indeed distinguished panelists, and our first panelist, I don't think I have to introduce in his hometown. Minister Stefanović, thank you for being with us. Minister has been in politics for a decade and a half, serving as a member of parliament, as a speaker of the National Assembly of Serbia, and as a Minister of Interior since 2014. In your current role, Minister, you lead the largest ministry in Serbia, which safeguards some of the most important and sensitive information in this country, and which has embarked at the beginning of your mandate on a strategic process of strengthening Serbia's cybersecurity capacities by establishing a computer emergency response team, CERT, in your ministry. And I'm proud to say that Serbian CERT in the Ministry of Interior is already today seen as an important center of competence, not only nationally, but regionally. So I'm very happy to have you here with us. Ambassador Denis Keefe has been the United Kingdom's ambassador in Serbia since 2014. He has a distinguished diplomatic career after joining the Foreign Service in 1982, with recent postings that include UK Ambassador to Georgia and Deputy Ambassador to the Russian Federation. Through his career, Ambassador Keefe has participated in and supported many important developments, and I was really delighted to go through your CV, so including the development of the European Common Market, including the German unification process, the development of the European Common Security, Foreign and Security Policy, the Czech preparations for EU NATO membership, to only name some. The United Kingdom has a long track record developing e-governance services and is working hard to secure the societal and institutional resilience to threats emanating from the cyberspace. I also wish to underline that the Embassy of the United Kingdom in Belgrade has generously supported the development of cybersecurity capacities in Serbia in partnership with the Ministry of Interior and DCAF, my organization. Our third panelist is Mrs. Marina Kaljurand, who served as the Estonian Foreign Minister from July 2015 until October 2016. She has also served as the Estonian ambassador to several countries, including the United States, the Russian Federation, Israel, Mexico, and Canada. Ambassador Kaljurand has been appointed twice to serve as the Estonian national expert at the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts on developments in the field of information and telecommunications in the context of international security. She has joined the Estonian Foreign Ministry in 1991, where she has held several leadership positions. As you all know, Estonia was named by some as the most advanced digital society today. It started development of e-governance services early in the 90s, and this early uptake of e-governance technology has also meant that Estonia had to develop ways to keep these services secure, especially following the cyber attacks of 2007 that Estonia has suffered. Today, Estonia is among the leading nations in when it comes to expertise to cybersecurity. Let me also mention that Madam Kaljurand today heads the Global Commission on Stability of the Cyberspace, which is a multi-stakeholder platform discussing, globally principles, norms, rules of behavior when it comes to cybersecurity. So having introduced the session, I would not waste your time any further, and I would turn to our panelists and pose questions. For Minister Stefanović, I would start with you, and I would ask you if you could tell us a bit more about how the Serbian government, and most notably the ministry you are leading, uses new information and communication technologies, and how does that affect the services you provide to citizens?
Thank you first for organizing this and for the opportunity to speak with our colleagues today. And you can notice that only 1 out of 3 of us is having an iPad in front of her, and Ambassador Keefe is still stuck with the papers. Yeah, mine's the bag, but not in front of me. So we are let's see who's the leading nation in information technologies. But to be quite honest, I introduced myself with what your government has been doing in the past years, and it's really something remarkable that, when you just go to complete electronic government and, there are no papers anymore, it really increases the flow, and it's much faster for the citizens to get the information from the government. And when we are on this topic, as you said, this use of information and communication technologies by the state, by the businesses, by the citizens, also opens new risks. And I think that the government of Serbia has recognized the importance of the use of ICTs, of course, but somehow it seems to me that we are going into this very fast, and sometimes the necessary security mechanisms have not been installed. Of course, this is something that goes both for the citizens and for the institutions, for the government. Our global job is to pay attention to these new threats that are being introduced with the use of ICTs. So we as a government have been realizing, and we realize the importance and significance, seriousness of these issues, and we are working very intensely on creating a sustainable information society. Our job is to create greater communication possibilities for our citizens, but our job is also to create a sustainable security mechanisms and measures which will protect the cyberspace. Cyber attacks have shown to be able to interrupt the functioning of the services, to make huge financial damage, to compromise citizens' private data, which of course privacy data are something that Ministry of Interior is very keenly protecting, and even to disrupt national and global security. By all indicators, attacks on information and communication systems are constantly on the rise, both globally and in Republic of Serbia. The interconnection between computers and systems via the internet makes them more vulnerable and exposed to risks, which is of course normal, especially due to the fact that the attack may come from any location in the world. And in these regards, most of the attacks have an international character, speaking about attacks in Serbia, as they can be carried out, and they are carried out from the territory of different states and cause damages that is no limit to one country only. In this regard, quality communication and exchange of relevant information on attacks between states are of crucial importance, helping to stop and mitigate incidents and, of course, to discover and incapacitate perpetrators. That's why our country is putting considerable efforts and resources in development of information society and e-government services. Ministry of Interior is responsible for keeping databases on citizens that are vital for the largest number of e-government services. Record of assigned personnel identification numbers, which are unique for each and every citizen of our country. Residence records of certain categories or for citizens permanently as a residence here or on some other capacities. And we are particularly responsible for the data contained in the databases to be accurate, complete, and available. In doing so, access to data can be granted only to users and services which are entitled to do so. The ministry is working constantly on improvement of protection of its ICT systems, both at technical and organizational level. As you said, we were actually the pioneers in establishing CERT in our ministry in 2015, well before some other institutions started even to think about that, which was, I'm proud to say so, that our teams were very capable of doing that. But of course, that doesn't mean that we're done with this. Our job is to continue and to advance technology as best as we can. Of course, in August 2015, our sector for analytics, telecommunication, information technology started these operations, and these organization units are tasked with protection of ICT system, taking measures to prevent attack and responding in case of attacks on our information and communication system for the purpose, of course, to preserving system functioning and security. The good thing about it is that our databases are not connected to internet or any other system, because there were some talks in the past, there were some even media, I would say rumors, that some of the databases from the ministry have been leaked, and we also opened to the public opportunity to check to see that these information are not even in a form close or similar to database that ministry holds. But also very important again to say that our databases are fully not in communication with any foreign let's say, entities, internet or any other environment that could be jeopardized or communicated through with our databases. Of course, the risks are, and they remain to be, of course, watched always. There could be only internal flaws which we have to take care of, and we are doing that. And so far, I can say that there haven't been not even one single successful attack on the ministry's databases, and they haven't been compromised, not even once in the history of Ministry of Interior, at least from the moment that we have been taking care of that. But these are very important topics for us. This is something that we owe to the citizens, that they know that their databases are secure, and that each and every information that we are tasked to protecting, that we are doing so. Of course, this opens another issues of communication with other state institutions and providing services that the ministry is doing, but that's being done through the specific set of protocols that through intranet allows only designated users to communicate with our databases in a safe and secure way. But that's maybe for another topic.
Thank you, Minister, for this introduction. I will turn to you, Ambassador, and to the UK. How did the introduction of e-governments affect the UK government service delivery, and how did you see it as a citizen? How did you see it as a diplomat?
Well, let me start with a personal illustration, if you like. You mentioned that I joined the diplomatic service in 1982. Now, one or two people in this room, I think, like me, are old enough to remember what work in government was like in those days. We had manual typewriters. In my first embassy, when we wanted to transmit a message to London, somebody had to type something up on tape and feed it through a machine. And I remember on one occasion when that machine failed, a colleague who had been in the Royal Navy actually sent a message by Morse code. So, and in those days, none of this was even conceivable. But I think later on, 20 years later, I was leading the team that wrote Britain's first national counter-terrorism strategy. And at that stage, of course, we had plenty of technology available to help us, and the people who were working operationally had very good technology. But the idea that cyber security, the word didn't even exist, was actually a real part of the threat then. If you read that document now, you won't see it there. You may see some reference, to need to protect networks, but you won't see very much. Fast forward to today, and one of my sons has been earning his living for the last few years working in cybersecurity. He's worked for the government. He's worked for companies like Dark Edge, Protect. But the interesting thing is that the company he now works for is Let's Eat. And I don't know if you know this. It's an online platform where you can order fast food and it will be delivered. Now, what does this tell us? Apart from the fact that maybe Let's Eat pays better than the government, I don't know. But it tells us, first of all, the ubiquity of things done in cyberspace, and the fungibility of the skills that are needed to do them. The idea when I started my career that somebody who knew about government communications would be able to go and get a job with an innovative food company. It was just, it couldn't have been understood. So it tells us that. It also tells us, if you like, the banality of what we're dealing with now. Extremely sophisticated technology being used to deliver an entirely everyday function, ordering a sandwich. And of course, it's not just in the food business that we're talking about. As a citizen in the UK, the other day, I went online and I registered to vote in my hometown. I'm going to, when I go back to the UK at the beginning of November, I need to see my doctor. I've made that appointment online. I'll arrange the medication I need online. the taxes, passports, many services now are provided online through apps. But there's a third, even more important thing that my son's move from cybersecurity as such to the food business tells us. It tells us that underlying all of these developments is one single big issue, and it's the issue that Rose Gottemöller and the Prime Minister talked about yesterday in that very interesting session. The point is, this is all about trust. The reason Let's Eat need to hire cybersecurity people to write their software is that their business depends entirely on trust and could be lost very quickly if something went wrong. If something went wrong with the trust of their customers, if something went wrong with the trust of their suppliers. And as an example, in British government work, in Foreign Office work, of somewhere where precisely this happened. Fortunately, it wasn't a disaster, but it wasted a lot of time and money. When we reached the point that we thought we could communicate with British citizens overseas online, we set up a system to do so. We asked people to come onto our embassy websites, to register, to tell us where they were, who they were, what they were doing. Do you know what? They didn't. British citizens living and working abroad did not think that the amount of data they would need to give the government was worth the chance that one day we would need to ring them to tell them that there'd been an earthquake or something. Instead, now we do it entirely the other way round. We tell our citizens to follow our embassies on Twitter, and we find that when the balloon goes up, that is the way to get information to them. Now, I could say more, and I hope there'll be an opportunity to say more about the way we approach e-government and cybersecurity in the UK and the very valuable cooperation we have with Serbia on this. But I want to dwell at the beginning on this question of trust, because it seems to me it's not simply a technical question about whether an individual service works or not. It's about the fundamental role of government. And particularly in a country such as Serbia and other countries in the Western Balkans, for whom the great task, it seems to me at the moment, is modernization of society, modernization of government, modernization of the economy. You are doing it in an era when every effective modernization has to be done through e-processes. That's something that the government here very clearly understands. But it means that this trust in the institutions, this trust in the way that the state works, this trust in the way the economy works, is having to be built precisely in the era when the threats to the trust in a technical sense have become ubiquitous and extremely dangerous. So we feel we face a challenge in the UK in dealing with these things. I think for countries in the position that Serbia is, the challenge is even greater. And that, of course, as a diplomat, that's one of the reasons why it's such a great thing to be working in Serbia and working with colleagues here. But there you are. It's all about trust.
Thank you, Ambassador. Madam Kaljurand, Estonia is very developed, is a global leader. You've moved from some e-administration services to some government to really looking at governance, engagement with citizens, societal engagement with your institution is being transformed. Why are Estonians so keen on developing e-governance services, and that despite such an evident exposure to cyber threats that your country has faced and continues to face?
Well, thank you for the question. And to start with, I'm really happy and privileged to be here today in Belgrade and to be in such a distinguished panel. And I listened very carefully to what Minister and Ambassador had to say about their countries, and I'll be really happy to share some experience coming from my country. Well, the name of the country, Estonia, says everything. It's Estonia, which means that We say it very publicly. We call it e-lifestyle. We are e-dependent. We have about 1,000 internet services that we are providing to our people and our population. We are also providing it to foreigners. So just Google, find e-residency, and all foreigners are most welcome to join the program and take some advantage of the digital services. Sorry, I come closer to the mic. From the digital services that we're providing. Well, to start with, your Skype, yeah? Skype was invented by Estonians. So it goes so far. So the digital, being a small country, 1.3 million, we discovered that being small is a privilege. If you're smart, if you're efficient, if you're good. It's not so much economy, finances, army, like it was in the last century or centuries before. It's being smart. It's being connected and being efficient. So I'll bring you just a couple of examples from our lifestyle. Estonia was the first country in the world to introduce paperless e-government, which means that when I was foreign minister, I could attend the meetings of the government and digitally sign the papers wherever I was, and I did it. We were the first country in the world to introduce nationwide digital signatures. Digital signatures are so wide, with population 1.3 million, so far we have given about 400 million digital signatures. 1.3, 400 million. It saves us annually 2% of GDP. It saves us annually 5 working days, 1 week. We can have vacation, we can have parties, and 2% of GDP. We're NATO members, yeah? Our defense expenditure is 2% of GDP, which means defense comes free. So there are very clear benefits. Estonia was the first country in the world to introduce online voting. And we're still the only country in the world who is doing all national online voting. So at the moment, we're also in the process of local elections. I haven't been home for a long time, so I voted from Krakow a couple of days ago at the cyber conference where delegates on the stage were discussing e-voting, whether it's good or not. Okay, we have done it since 2005, and we are continuing to do. At the first voting, 2005, the percentage who participated was about 2%. 2 years ago, the percentage who voted online was 30. 1/3 of Estonian population decided to vote online. And the results of e-voting are already there, and this time we will be doing even higher, which means that people have understood. It's good. We like it. My mother is 92, she's Skyping. So we break the stereotypes that ICT is only for savvy young IT geeks. No, ICT is for everybody, but you have to find what is useful. It can't be dictated by the government. It has to be recognized by the people, that it's good for them, they want to take advantage of that. And it brings me to the question of, yes, you said very rightly that 2007, we were the first country in the world to fall under cyber attacks. It was for the first time in the history of mankind that one country used cyber weapon or cyber operations against an independent state. We were lucky to have those DDoS attacks. They were not very sophisticated, they didn't kill anybody, they didn't destruct anybody, but they were disturbing. They were disturbing and they were humiliating to a country that considers itself being e-savvy. Our banks, private banks, could not operate for some time. Our monumental websites were taken down, websites of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, President, Prime Minister, MFA. So it was humiliating. But it was a wake-up call. So since 2007 and even earlier, we've been going around the world and talking about cybersecurity, importance of it. Nobody listened to us at the beginning. Now, 2017, the picture is changing. You're discussing cybersecurity. Name me an organization that is not discussing cybersecurity nowadays, because it's so widespread, it's so global, it's so important. So the 3 lessons we learned from 2007, cyber attacks. First, you have to have your house in order. And we will come to the strategies and action plans in our second part of the discussion. Second, governments alone can do nothing. Governments had to cooperate with private sector, with academia, with civil society. There has to be all-nation approach Cybersecurity is so complicated that for the first time in the history of mankind, governments are not able to secure it without cooperation with other stakeholders, other players. And the third lesson, international cooperation. Cyber does not have borders. If we want to be efficient in cybersecurity, we need international cooperation, and I hope that we will come also to that later. And some words about the role of the government. We think that government has the central role in cybersecurity in each and every nation, and also internationally. In the nation, government is the one that has to secure exchange of data, integrity of data, authentication of people who participate or who want to take advantages of online services. It's the government. They are the central. But in cooperation with, as I said, other multi-stakeholders. So the question of trust, crucial. Government with private sector can introduce different internet services. But if people don't trust, they will not do it. Trust can't be gained like that in a second. It takes time, it takes years, and it's very easy to lose the trust. And that's why when I was talking about online voting taking place in Estonia at the moment, I was so proud that after all what has happened during the last years, hacking DNC, WannaCry, interfering into elections in the Western countries, what the governments have done, they have stepped back. They have said, it's a problem, let's go back to paper and pencil. And I'm proud that my government didn't. My government asked our people, do you still want to continue with online voting? And the answer was yes, and it's your responsibility as a government. Guarantee us that it's safe, secure exchange of data. And the proof of the high percentage of those people who participate in internet voting these days shows that government can have trust of people, but not imposing from above, but starting what people want to do. So the first services that really people cared about in Estonia were internet banking, internet taxation. We used to stand in queues before that to get the salaries. We used to stand in queues to file in our taxation forms, and then it changed. Today I can fill in my taxation form. Well, I'm not too IT savvy. It takes me 5 minutes. My son does it in a minute. But it's much more convenient. Then it was e-health. It was so good to hear that, that Brits can register themselves online. We can exchange data with doctors. I own my medical data, which means that I can send it for a second opinion to second doctor, to third doctor. Prescriptions are done online. I can have my prescriptions in any pharmacy all over the country. E-school, I followed the grades of my kids even before they came home. I knew what was their task and what grades they had. So there are benefits that people are interested in. I'm not saying that all people have to take advantage of the 1,000 internet services, no. I'm using maybe 20, 25, and I'm good. But there has to be the driving force coming from the people towards the government, telling the government what to do, how to do. And government's obligation is to provide also sources. You can introduce internet services, but if people don't have computers or access to computers, or if there is not enough Wi-Fi coverage, what's the use of the services? So that we started with computers in every school, in every public institution, in every local authority, in every library. So I think that today we're covered with Wi-Fi. Perhaps you can find somewhere in the forests a spot without Wi-Fi, but it's covered, which means that it's easy for people to access the internet services. So I'll stop here, but I hope that during discussion I'll have the chance to explain in more details why and what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much on this inspiring talk. And I think that actually introduces our second group of questions. You said government has a central role to play. Government cannot do it all, but it has a central role to play. So my next topic is actually that role that government plays, or the infrastructure the government develops, the institutional policy infrastructure, and also you know, how does the government go about ensuring security? So, Minister, you are heading a ministry that is about ensuring security to the citizens of Serbia. How do you institutionally go about ensuring secure transactions between, or secure interactions between citizens and government? You already started addressing and you talked about trust. Can you tell us a bit more, you know, about also maybe the way ahead?
Well, trust really, as Ambassador Keefe said, plays an important role, because this kind of availability, reliability, resilience of critical information is important not only for the government and the ministry, but also for the citizens. And one of the things that leads to lack of trust is, of course, possibility that someone can corrupt data, not only important government data, but also private data from each and every ordinary citizen. And that's one of the tasks that we have been given to our institutions to take care of. And I already talked to you about introducing, in August 2015, we introduced CERT, and a few of our experts are here sitting in the first row from Ministry of Interior, which were part of the team that started building that capacity of the ministry to address these issues and to make sure that people have trust in the ministry and in its government to protect their personal informations and all of these databases that we hold. And that's one of the, I would say, key tasks that the government has. And of course, one of the first things that we've done is to make sure that each and every issue is being dealt with in a professional way, and each segment of the system that takes care of the personal data and of informational security basis is defended against each and every external influence, which wasn't easy if you want to communicate with other institutions, if you want to share these information, if you want to be able to give e-services to the citizens. As Madam Kaljurand said, you have to be able to communicate to the citizens. Protecting that kind of database is one of the key tasks, and so far we have been successful. Most of our cyber attacks is coming from our neighboring states, and besides the ones that are coming, of course, from our states itself. But so far the ministry has been able to make sure that our databases are protected, so not even once have them been compromised. We have, of course, established in February of this year intersectoral working group, which is tasked to adopt a legal framework for this area involving representatives of all relevant state institutions, faculties, all other representatives of business associations, because as three of us said today, without communication and cooperation between all of these entities, it's impossible that it's only placed in the hands of the state. There are other stakeholders which could interfere, that could help, that could contribute, maybe that's a better word, contribute to the security and, of course, to all these topics that not only state is thinking about, but that are crucial for the citizens. And I can say a few things about crime and, let's say, high-tech crime that we've been seeing. Of course, I would say one of the key issues here is communication and cooperation with other states. For us, our high-tech crime division is, I would say, still new, and I mean, even they're there for a few years, but they're still new because of the new challenges that we are facing. But they're enhancing their capabilities each and every day. And that was the key, not only for these guys, but also for most of the ministry's teams, enhancement, knowledge, and trainings, which have to go on a daily basis, especially in a high-tech system, with high-tech world. I mean, the cyber world is changing in each and every second. So if you lose the touch, if you lose the pace, then it's impossible to say that you're equipped well enough to fight that. And you know that we have some of examples that could target our country more in the future. That was a business email compromise scam that is done through electronic messages at the expense of legal entities. They follow, it's of course, you know that these new cyber attacks are done very precisely, very accurately, they're executed professionally, and it takes really a great care and great professionalism and of course security measures to prevent it. What they've done is they were monitoring communication between business partner, and that at a certain moment they exchange their invoices, so damaging the companies that were paying the false invoices, and in that way it was very difficult also to determine where the attacks came from, because they were done through shadow systems, routed throughout the world. So it was a challenge for us, especially that the targets were companies which so far in Republic of Serbia lost nearly 2 million euros. So it was a significant damage to the private companies that were damaged through these kind of sophisticated attacks. One of the things that we've noticed, not only here but in other fields of cooperation, was the lack of communication, which also led, or let's say very slow communication between police services and the states, countries, which led to us being less able to react fastly, to react in a way to protect companies and citizens, not only our country but other countries, because sometimes working through regular channels that takes weeks, sometimes months, even to get a simple response. For example, where is this server or this IP address, where is it coming from, or how do you respond to that? So one of our tasks was also to work very closely with our colleagues abroad to explain, and sometimes authorities have been faster than the other elements of the countries. Sometimes even our relations have been closer than some other state elements, because police officers and the people tasked especially for the cybercrime realized that only split-second decisions and decisions that are made very fast could compete with this kind of crime. Sometimes I joke with our guys and say, I suppose that there are some kids that are 15, 16 years old that know more than about cyberspace and what to do with that, then we'll know until the end of the rest of our lives. But the fact is that citizens count on us to be fast, to be precise, to be professional. And I'm glad to say that I've seen that my guys from the teams of criminalistic police have realized that they are going, and I'm very happy whenever we have a good cooperation. We have, for example, excellent cooperation with the United Kingdom on these issues, that our guys are being invited to the trainings and courses which help them, enable them to be top of the Europe. I mean, we proved with the results which are connected with fighting against drugs, fighting against organized crime, which is also moving more and more in the internet. You know, all the scams with the bitcoins now, which are almost common thing, and that is becoming even more and more challenging, especially in a world that still doesn't really acknowledges that this kind of problem exists in such a form and such a magnitude. So these are the things that we are working very closely with other state institutions of Republic of Serbia, Ministry of Telecommunication, of course, especially because they are in charge of many of the things that we are working together. Of course, the new laws that have been passed and that we are working on in the future. And I think that one of the issues also that was raised within the police ranks and of course within the public was threats to our children on the internet. That was a few very important topics that we had. We reacted in two ways. I think that both were adequate, and still, of course, we need to advance that. The first was to realize that only the education is the key. So we started a program as Ministry of Interior, which is sometimes, you know, people said it was strange that Ministry of Interior starts this kind of program, but we started in elementary schools for the 4th and 6th grade. We started educating young people about 8 topics the lecturers are experienced police officers which have certificates for training and work with the minors. And also additional trainers are police pensioners with a great experience in these fields. One of the topics is a threat in cyberspace, cybersecurity. And we've seen that the children are interested, parents are interested, and the professor teachers which are attending class as well are also interested. So we achieved something that we hope that first will raise awareness of the problems of the cybercrime, of all things that are lurking our kids in the internet, because internet, and I was really amazed what you said about what you achieved so far in your country. But that is, I hope, a near future also for Serbia. And that means that actually most of our everyday needs will be done through the internet. That means that the threat, because crime really evolves like a cancer, they will see that this is actually a way to change and to develop. They will go there and they will target. They don't want to know whether it's your kid or your grandmother. They will target everyone. So first we need to raise awareness that everyone knows that the threat is there. And second, to increase, and that's the second thing that we've done, to increase capability of our force to combat that, to have an immediate and harsh response, which will turn these people away. We also had a huge fight through the campaign, through the constant action that we call Armageddon, which is fight against pedophiles on the internet. And I'm proud to say that I see more and more parents joining in, helping us, posing as their kids on the internet and continuing communication long enough until prosecutor has enough data that we can apprehend this kind of criminals. So that means that kids are now aware of that. I mean, it's not maybe fully, but we are working on that. Also, parents are now more and more aware of what is the real threat, and the government has shown that it has enough sense to realize the problem is there, that we need to change the way that we work, and that's the only way to be efficient in this field of work. So, of course, we can speak about many other topics in high-tech crime, but I think these are the major one, and this is the things that the government is doing on a technical level, on prevention, and of course building up capacity of its services to protect the citizens.
Thank you indeed, Minister, for this actually very rich address, which brings out a number of topics in many layers to unpick, from cooperation with the business sector to actually the trust of the business sector in the government, and that is crucial. But we've also addressed the issue of cybercrime and cooperation fighting crime. Serbia, in this region, is among the leading nations in developing cooperation, police, law enforcement cooperation. But we also realize that that as criminals are moving to the cyberspace, the cooperation between the nations in addressing crime needs to also be competent in the cyberspace. And then you address something that all of us who are parents and all of us are very concerned about. I mean, our kids today hold in their hands the computing power of 1980s mainframes, and they are connected 24/7. I think that's also something rightfully through prevention measures that needs to be tackled. Ambassador Keefe, in the UK has, like many other countries, entrusted its cybersecurity capacities to a security agency. In your country, the National Center for Cybersecurity is within the government communications headquarters, the GCHQ. Security agencies are traditionally closed, and especially those who deal with intelligence. But as Minister has rightly pointed out, cybersecurity goes beyond these traditional security roles. It is about communication, it's about openness, it's about engagement of the business sector, it's about prevention as well as countermeasures. So can you please say something about the UK's institutional infrastructure and experience from developing it?
Thank you. I mean, I think that this is absolutely right. There was a time not so long ago when people felt that the expertise that was needed to deal with sophisticated threats lay specifically with sophisticated agencies. And of course some of it does. But the real issue is that when you have a threat that affects everybody, that affects every institution, every company, every individual, then the real answer to that lies partly in people's own hands. So you have to find an approach that empowers people, gives them the information they need to make themselves as safe as possible, while the government and government institutions and businesses play their role. We've tried to address this in the UK by developing a national strategy. We like national strategies, but there is a very good reason for having national strategies, because a national strategy enables you to set out openly and transparently what you see as in the case of a security one, what you see as the threat, what you see as the ways that it can be combated, what you see as the different roles that people have. And then you can use that as the basis of communication. It's what we did with the counter-terrorism strategy, which has been updated several times since it was first put in place. But one of the fundamental ideas in that was we need to tell people what is out there and what their part in dealing with it can be. And the same with cybersecurity. Again, in our tidy-minded way, we've bracketed things in the cybersecurity strategy under 3 headings, all of which begin with D: defend, deter, and develop. Now, defend is about making sure that everybody is doing the things that make it more difficult for them to be attacked. It's from basic hygiene and with things like passwords to much more sophisticated things about the design of systems, whether or not particular systems are indeed connected out externally. As the Minister said, some systems you decide we are never going to connect this to the outside world because we cannot manage it. So there's that side. And then there's the deter, which is about making it clear to people who might attack us that we have capability, that we are after them, that we are not going to be passive in this. And the third is develop. Obviously, you need to stay ahead of the game. You need to understand the threats that are coming. You need to understand what in the world with your partners there is that exists to defeat threats. And one of the things that is really important and comes out when you look at our strategy is that, of course, this is not simply something that you do as an individual nation state, as an individual government. It's a global threat, and the response has to be global. And so we make it a fundamental principle of our approach to work with our allies, to work with those who have real knowledge. I mean, this is one of the wonderful things about Estonia. That's a small country maybe, but you have a lot of expertise, and you're also a country that cooperates internationally. This means that there are sources of strength, sources of support around the world, which need cultivating, and we see the Balkans as an area where there are examples of excellence and clarity on these things. The Minister has talked about Serbia's approach, but where there is not yet enough action regionally, not yet enough capability, and it needs to be built up. And we feel, as the UK, we can play a part in helping to do that. And to give you some examples, as the Minister had mentioned, we have some specific programs of cooperation with Serbia, with the Ministry of the Interior, but more which are very effective, and with our National Cybersecurity Centre. But we also have a wider cooperation with the Serbian government on e-governance and with the new e-government office, because as I said before, this is it's all one thing. It's all about this. Do people trust the systems? Are they right to trust the systems? systems if we persuade them to trust them. And it's about building up capability overall. And also, as part of this, as you know, the British government will be hosting the next in the series of Western Balkan summits next year. There's going to be quite a lot of Western Balkan activity next year, by the way. The EBRD is having one of its regular summits in London. The Bulgarian presidency of the EU will be holding an EU Western Balkans event. And I see this all as a great opportunity for engagement with the Balkans to deliver support in doing some of the things that governments here and peoples here want to do. And we've identified for our summit digital, the whole digital arena as one of the key things we want to work on, because we think there's scope. And within that, we've identified cybersecurity as one of the streams that we will work on, because you can't be safe on your own in the modern world, and the threat to children is a real aspect of that. Very active as a government in international work against abuse of children online. It's one of the subjects that the minister and I engage on, and we do that first because we feel it's a really important subject in itself, but because it's part of this wider international response. We feel that countries that know what they're doing and share our values, we all need to be working together internationally to tackle this threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Kaljurand, how does Estonia secure Estonia? Who does it, how it's done, and how has this security infrastructure developed? Maybe trying to allow us to draw some lessons from your experience for our region.
Well, thank you. First of all, I listened very carefully to what Minister and Ambassador said, and I have to say that I have to subscribe to almost everything they said. And I very much like what Minister said about educating kids, awareness raising. You're starting from grade 4. We're starting from grade 1. In grade 1, we teach programming, and we teach cyber hygiene. The way how you brush your teeth in the morning, how to behave in cyber. Because we were considering starting in the kindergarten, but kindergarten, not all kids go to kindergarten. So it's part of the official curricula, and first graders, we have to start with them. So if I might advise, bring it lower. 7th graders, they can do, 7-year-old kids, they can do a lot already. Second, what was mentioned about crime and police, we also introduced special cyber units and special cyber officers who are dealing with child pornography, cyber stalking, revenge porn, and all the new fields of crime that are emerging and that will continue emerging during the process when people take just more advantage of the cyber and use of ICTs. And I also would like to echo what Ambassador said. We also like strategies, but not only for writing them. They're nice pieces, you have good friends sitting drafting them, but we see also the benefits. And we see the benefits in clarification, who is responsible for what, financing, leaving no gray zones, because it makes the cyberspace more predictable and more secure. So as I said when I mentioned in the first session, one of the lessons we learned was to have our house in order. So our first cyber strategy goes back to 2008. Our second cyber strategy was adopted in 2014, and now we're in the phase of preparing the third cyber strategy. They are building on each other, but they look differently. The world is changing. All the speakers have said that developments are so quick, which means that you have to be on the top of the events. You have to look at the new challenges. You have to look on better ways of cooperation or better ways of coordination, not leaving gray zones. Gray zones are used, or at least bad guys attempted to use the gray zones. So the coordinating authority in our case is different. It's the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications. And under them is also our national CERT. But I would say that all ministries are involved. The bigger role is for, of course, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Justice. You might ask, Foreign Affairs, come on guys, but international cooperation is crucial in guaranteeing cybersecurity and tackling cybercrimes and so on and so on. So diplomats are those who are sitting also with this audience and talking about cyber diplomacy. So MFA definitely has its role, as has MOD, Ministry of Justice, and others. What are the main threats? I looked at the report of our CERT from last year. When I said 2007 attacks were not sophisticated, they were not. DDoS attacks, they are happening on every second nowadays. So what the main threats in 2016? Estonian CERT handled 9,000 recorded cases. 9,000 recorded cases. 1/4 were cybersecurity incidents that directly impacted confidentiality, integrity, or availability of data or systems. So I would say they were serious ones. And almost one per day, there were high priority incidents that affected functioning of a website or service considered important to the state. One per day. That's the reality. And the number of threats, the number of attacks, the number of operations will increase a lot when we move into the phase of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics, big data. We are doing our first steps. But we will not have 40 years like we had with the invention of Internet before it became public. We will have maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years, but the threats are going to grow. So what are the key fields of our strategy? They are, first, ensuring vital services, second, combating cybercrime, and third, advancing national defense capabilities. I don't want to go into the details of the strategy. It's available, it's public, Google it and you'll find it. And if you go on the website of the NATO Center of Excellence of Cyber Defense, then there is a good analysis of the cyber strategies of almost all NATO allies. So that's why I'm not going to repeat what's written there. But what is important in our strategy is that it has annual action plans. And action plans are incorporated into the working plans of ministries. And ministries are reporting annually about providing reviews of their activities in the field, about the challenges, and also financing. So the strategy goes down to the ministries, and the ministries start reporting back. So everybody is involved. And what I'd like to say, as I also repeated, as I said before, there has to be all-nation approach. Not only ministries, but private sector, civil society, academia. Why private sector? Private sector is the one who owns today critical infrastructure in many countries, or at least vast amount of critical infrastructure. Private sector is the one that provides internet services. So private sector is as important player as government. Responsibility lays with government, but private sector is very important. Again, we learned our lessons. 2007, during the cyber attacks, private sector came to assist government. The IT geeks, whom government can never afford because they're so expensive, came to assist the government voluntarily out of patriotism, 2007. Soon they discovered that it's good to have partnership with the government, so the Cyber Defense League was established. Cyber Defense League is a part of voluntary military cyber defense union. So all the people who are in the Cyber Defense League come from private sector, some of them from public sector, different backgrounds. Lawyers, economists, IT folks, technology experts, very different backgrounds. They have security clearances, and they're doing it for free. They are interested because they want to be in the same information loop with the government. They want to participate in the same exercises. They want to be informed and educated the same way as government and government officials are. And at least in our system, it has proved it works. As a foreign minister, I was very often hearing at international conferences that private sector was complaining, nobody's listening to us. And I know that there are governments that are not, let's say, not very willing to listen to industry or private sector because we know how it works, come on. But in this field, cybersecurity, we can't and we shouldn't avoid listening to private sector and talking to them. I brought you the example of Estonian Cyber Defense League. I'll bring another example, Microsoft. Industry that is very active in cybersecurity, proposing different proposals, proposing different solutions. I don't agree to everything what they're doing. And I'm very open and public about that. I discussed with them one of their proposals on Geneva Convention a couple of days ago. But I would like to recognize them for doing it. Recognize that they are active, they care, they cooperate with governments, and they will make proposals. So if I again may, then my call to all the governments is to listen to private sector, talk to industry, because we want the same. We want stability, we want security of cyberspace. And that's why cooperation with private sector is absolutely, absolutely crucial. Why academia? I would say that cybersecurity it's a difficult topic. For example, if we talk about laws, laws in real life, international law is real life, is complicated. And now put it into the context of cyber, it becomes even much more complicated. Even the best legal advisors in the ministries are not able to come out with reasonable explanations, interpretations, without the assistance of academia, without the assistance of experts. So for the first time, I repeat what I said, but I think that for the first time in the history of mankind, governments can't deal with security, with cybersecurity, without very close involvement of other multi-stakeholders.
Excellent. Well, I would actually turn around the panel and I would actually go back to you again. And
Sure.
Because I think you've started on the topic, so I think it maybe makes sense to complete this line of thoughts. The third sort of set of issues I wanted to discuss is about cooperation. You've mentioned, international cooperation. You've mentioned different initiatives. You talked about Microsoft and the Geneva Convention. I'm coming from Geneva, so of course, a mention of a Geneva Convention is very dear to us as an idea, but of course that's an idea that needs to be discussed. So international cooperation is about governments, it's multi-stakeholder, it's the industry, the civil society, it's complex. How do we go about dealing with this complexity? How do you see this, I suppose, asynchrony between what you said is we have 3-4 years to react to technology developing, but these dialogues take much longer. And what do you think we can get out of these dialogues that will help guide government action, either regionally, at the continent level or globally?
Well, it's a good question. It's my favorite one. Now I can talk not only for hours, for days about that. But I'll try to be brief. There are many international organizations out there dealing with cybersecurity. And I would say that they all have their role. They all have their role. They shouldn't duplicate each other, but they should be more complementary. I'll bring you an example. From Estonian perspective, when we look at different organizations, when I look at the United Nations, for us, it's a global organization, and I'm really happy to see my very good colleague from the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts, Dragan, sitting also in the audience. For us, UN is important as international law, global norms of responsible state behavior, new threats on a global level. When I come to the regional level, then I would say that OSCE from us is crucial for confidence building measures. Exchanging strategies, informing each other, advising each other, getting to know each other, so that we can avoid misunderstandings and so that we can avoid possible conflicts before they even arise. EU, from our perspective, is the driver of a digital single market. I'm not happy with the EU at the moment, not at all. At the moment where EU presidency, you can guess. Digital single market is on the top of our priority. We had digital summit in Tallinn a week ago, and we'll continue pushing it. I'm sorry you're not doing presidency. We could have done it together of us. Now we have to do it alone, but we will do it. NATO, very clear defense line. NATO has declared cyber as the 5th domain of operations. NATO is paying attention to joint exercises. I'm proud to say that the NATO Center of Excellence at Cyber Defense is in Tallinn, which is a NATO think tank, and I'd really advise you to go on their website. They have lots of good stuff there. Regional cooperation. I can't imagine Estonia without cooperation with the Baltic and Nordics. 5 Nordics, 3 Baltics, we are a region, so we do many things to get things. Bilateral dialogues, they all have their place. And of course, the Global Commission I'm chairing. It's cyberstability.org. It's a global one. It includes multi-stakeholders. It's from Berkeley to Beijing, from professors to hackers. And we try to continue where United Nations was not able to find solutions. So what I see the most crucial topics at the moment, I think that globally we are good with new threats, defining new threats. I think we are good with capacity building, confidence building. These are easy topics. Norms, international law, much more difficult. And I see #1 priority looking into international law. In 2013, we agreed in the United Nations that international law applies to cyber, full stop. But we don't know yet how. We're going from meeting to meeting saying, how does it apply, how does it apply? It's time to go further. And I would advise to look into that Tallinn manual, a book that was written a year ago by 20 international law experts, how they see applicability of international law to the cyber sphere. So the book should be on the tables of all legal advisors. Because legal advisors advise their ministries, advise their ministers, advise their governments, and they are the ones who start applying international law. Applying international law means predictability, means norms. What's happening today in Ukraine, being used as a platform for finding what is allowed, what's not. Hacks of democracy, these are all gray zones that are not fully interpreted by states, and we have to do that.
Thank you very much indeed. I will move on to Ambassador Keefe. You know, current UK's national cybersecurity strategy does emphasize international cooperation and does call for the UK's engagement, and you have started a bit discussing that in the regional context. You know, what does that mean in practice, UK's international engagement?
Well, I think the most important thing to say about it is that it involves a lot of engagement. Marina Kaljurand is far more expert than I. Just Marina, thank you. Marina is far more expert than I in these, what international structures there are, and there are now an increasing number of them. But the most important thing about them is that people should take part and take this seriously. We all know that one of the weaknesses of big international organizations is that after a while people start just to turn up because it's there, and you always do go there in whatever month of the year it is. But this is an area where, precisely because the threat is international, the threat is to everyone potentially has something to contribute. So this is why we take part in this summit the other day. We're contributing to the different centres in Europe and in NATO, the EU that have been set up, and why we're developing our cooperation with individual countries. Because if you take the example of Serbia, we have cooperation we're developing in cybersecurity. But one of the things that interests me most about the relationship between Serbia and Britain is simply the normal traffic that is going on through business and academia. Serbia is a country with a very strong record in mathematics, with a very strong record of producing computer scientists. Quite a few of those end up in the UK, I'm glad to say, studying or working, particularly at Cambridge University. But also, there are a lot here who are employed by British companies. There are British companies like Endava, for example, which are increasing their investment in Serbia because of the quality of staff, quality of people they can recruit coming out of Serbian schools and universities. So I think that the most important thing to say about international cooperation is that everybody needs to take part in the big structures, but also you need to work at the detail, work at finding where the expertise and the possibilities are, and take advantage of them. And along the way, of course, in doing so, you strengthen your own country and economy, you help to strengthen others' countries and economies, and we all get stronger and more prosperous. And that's what we're about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, on those words, which actually remind me of an article I've read about. I haven't read it, but I've read about it in Süddeutsche Zeitung recently, which said that Serbia is becoming basically an investment hub for IT industry, and that your country minister has immense capacities in the private sector and in very interesting in development industry. You're heading a ministry which is tackling a variety of security threats, and you are in a government which has proclaimed e-governance as its key priority for moving ahead. You're also a leader regionally in the area of fighting transnational crime. And you are currently chairing a process in the region called the Police Cooperation Convention, which is basically a Schengen for the Balkan region. How do you, looking at Serbia and the region, see developments of cooperation and sort of needs and challenges as we go ahead?
Well, I can say that I believe that we can go further with that. We can do more because so far we've noticed, like I would compare it to the cooperation of the security services. Usually it happens after an attack, after some huge event that shows all the loopholes of current, or let's say up till that time, cooperation. And then people realize that without full exchange, and of course timely exchange, it cannot be next year. I mean, that next day might be too late. Timely exchange, only then you sort of have a grasp of the situation. There is no perfect situation. I haven't seen it anywhere in the world. But for example, migration crisis, which Serbia was part of the countries that most of the migrants went through, shown us how the things developed in Europe. And we saw that at the beginning it was response from a group of countries, whether it was well organized or not. If we are talking about Europe, we can debate it. Then it dispersed to that each and every country did it on its own. The international institutions from UN to EU reacted in different ways. Sometimes I said in the same day with the two different representatives, and one told me the completely opposite thing of the other that Serbia should be doing. And we were like, if this is organized response, how did the other responses look like? But then we saw that consolidation. We saw that states are organizing themselves, institutions became more, let's say, interested in the details of the response. And of course, it had to be global, because response on a level of a country cannot give, or even a group of countries cannot give good and proper effect. And that's same goes for the IT, for the cyberspace. If we only apply it in one state, in one country, we can organize it the best possible way. Then it won't be enough to provide full security, won't be enough to provide full action and, let's say, services that we owe to the citizens. I heard here, the ambassador said about the British, if I can say British, UK, that you love strategies, and we started same. In 2014, we started the building with a huge support of the Swedish government and the DCAF, and thank you for that. IT development strategy that was passed in 2016, and it should be implemented by 2020. But that strategy, because Ministry of Interior was working very hard on it, implemented a lot of our cyber security response. And that was let's say, strategy that was legal framework that was done. Of course, I saw it in chapter 24 that putting an action plan is not the same as fulfilling one, but you have to work very hard. You have to work very hard on each and every of these topics. Then building CERT capacity, which we already discussed, was the second thing that we've done. And then something that should come natural, that's the regional cooperation between ministries of interior. Somewhere it of course includes Ministry of Justice, sometimes it includes security services, some other ministries, but important thing was that I hope that I cherish very close and dear relations with my colleagues which are living in our neighbor countries, and trying to improve them if they are not perfect in each and every country, and I will be trying to do it, because I saw when you push these limits, of course in cyberspace you cannot even speak about global limits, let alone the national boundaries or something like Balkans, or my colleague Jadran Kjoksinić would say, don't say Balkans, say Western, Eastern, Southeast Europe. But we are discussing now with our colleagues how to connect teams, and for example, in organized crime, joint investigative teams with the prosecutor, with the police officer, and the representative from both states or free states, prove to us that that kind of support and that kind of working together can give very fast, excellent results. Our criminals coming from our country are going to the Western Europe. They can earn more there. They're trafficking drugs from Southern Europe to Spain, from Spain dispersing it to the Western Europe. And only through cooperation with Great Britain, Germany, Spain, other countries, Croatia, we've been able to pinpoint them, to locate how they're operating. Now they're moving some of their operations to the cyberspace. And without being equally effective in working together, so if we are able to work together and jointly have these kind of operations, only then we'll be able to say that we've done everything humanly possible to protect our citizens and provide them full security, full cooperation, and full services. And I think that in our region, we realized that was important first step. We've started to improve that cooperation. Serbia is a country who has a potential that hasn't been fully realized yet. We still don't have, that's not fully my portfolio, but I've talked to some of the private investors that came that are interested in how many engineers we can have per year, how many people can be enrolled in these companies, and they need more, so we need to train more. I know that some of our faculties increase their capacity, especially in IT, and I will certainly take your advice, and I will speak to the Minister of Education. What can we do to start even with the first graders, some sort of programs to deal with them, because we are just, I think, now we are smart enough to recognize good advice when we see one, and to act upon it immediately, because this is what we are speaking about today. And thank you for this opportunity, of course.
Thank you, Minister, very much for your reflections. We have about 5, 6, 7 minutes. We might steal a couple from the coffee break. I would open at this point to the audience. I think we did really a 360 of different challenges. We talked about e-governance and trust, and we talked about the need for security as that bridge between trust and e-services. We talked about, the flow of experts from the public to the private sector. We talked about private-public cooperation, therefore, and also then the private sector and the public sector. We talked about regional, international cooperation. So I would probably take 4 questions from the audience, and then let the panel reflect on them. So I have 2 hands here.
We'll nominate Ambassador Keefe.
Thank you very much. My name is Dragan Mladenović, coming from Serbian Armed Forces, Ministry of Defense. Thank you, Marina, for your exceptional, short but very clever and useful manual, spoken manual, how to establish one country to have a leading role in the arena of cybersecurity. If you want to lead someone, you must go several steps in advance, not behind others. But different countries have a different environment, different internal, external players, as well as different culture. So, I know you are one of the most prominent experts who live and who is active in both two different worlds. One professional related to cybersecurity and another one political. You was the only foreign minister in the group of UN experts on cybersecurity among 25 other experts. So, could you share with us your ideas? How one country, what one country has to establish to make their its key political decision makers more aware to make crucial decides, how to take important steps in such way to make country much more successful, to be a leader in its region or in the world or in Europe in the field of cybersecurity. How to make problems to transfer into solutions and to take huge success in that field. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vladimir Radunović from Diplo Foundation. Quick question, well, great welcome to Marina. I won't throw out questions since Dragan already threw a question for you, but it's a great pleasure to have you with us. But then two comments for Ambassador and for Minister. For Ambassador, it's a good signal that we basically met each other in the last 10 days twice to discuss digital issues. Last week, launching the digital diplomacy program with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs jointly, discussing also cybersecurity, and now here, which is a good signal. You mentioned the cooperation or the support of Britain for Balkans. The research we did also together with DCAF last year on regional cooperation shows that there are bits and pieces of support and bits and pieces of programs in the region, but they're not coordinated even among the donor community or the international support. What can we do, or what could you do, particularly to help synchronizing the efforts and have a more sustainable and comprehensive effort in this regard? And then a question for Minister. Again, it's a great signal that we have a minister discussing cybersecurity. This is quite a paradigm shift in Serbia, and that's a great information. You discussed about the importance of the cooperation in the region. My question is, again, the same research shows that we do have in the region a great set of people on the operational level, on the mid-level, in the ministries, in the business sector and so on, many of them here as well. But we have a big gap between them and the CEO and ministerial level, understanding the importance of the topic and understanding that we actually have these people that we can use. What are maybe the venues that you see that we can use on the regional level that you could use to share the message with your colleagues, the ministers, the prime ministers in the region, to have more of the regional cooperation and use these capacities and set cybersecurity as one of the top on the agendas? Thank you.
We have a question there. Right. Just a second.
My name is Vyacheslav Balan. I'm coming from the VOC mission to Serbia. Thank you, Ms. Marina, for mentioning about the role of OC. My question is also to you and also to my colleagues from Serbian government. Since I'm working very closely on countering the misuse of internet for terrorist purposes and also for countering for committing crimes. My question is to you first, Ms. Marina. I'm aware that in Estonia you have established a community policing model on internet. which brings the community police officers to monitor the internet and also the neighborhood half a day, and then half a day to be in the territory and to speak to the people. Somehow you try to bring your policing tools on internet also to communicate with people. My question, how effective is this tool and how this model contributed to the security in your neighborhoods, and also to our counterparts, how far they want to go to bring the Estonian experience, and how you see the role of such institutions as is OC in the region. Thank you very much.
Do we have one more? Okay, so Madam Kaljurand from Mr. Mladenović. What does the country have to do to establish that level of awareness to start turning problems into solutions? How does one go about it at this political level?
Well, thank you, Dragan, for the question, and I think that we have discussed it also in the corridors in New York. But yes, I agree very much that if you want something to be seriously taken or seriously approached within the country, it has to be high on political agenda. It has to be high on political agenda. It means financing, it means awareness about it, everything. So I also agree the fact that your minister is sitting today here is already, it's a big step. What helped us in Estonia, we started doing all nation cyber exercises. Sorry, not all nation, all government. So that all members of government were participating in cyber exercises. So it was as a way of deterrence, as a way of responding to cyber operations, but also awareness raising. And today, all the ministers are responsible for ICT in their field. Social affairs, education, everybody has responsibility. So it has to be a political responsibility for the ministers. If ministers don't want, then I would ask private sector, civil society, and others to have influence on them. And in the end, we are voters. We vote for them. Tell them what you want. You want internet services. You want e-banking. Mr. Minister, are you going to have internet voting or internet banking? I want to vote for you, but I want to be clear. What is your position on cyber? So also voters have huge power in combination of everything. How to reach out to people? What I would say that we shouldn't go crazy about using only ICT and only online services. As I said, my mother is 92. She's doing her banking transactions, but she likes to go to the bank and to talk to the lady there. She likes to communicate with people. So we shouldn't forget about other options. And we have to find different tools for different age groups. Estonian young kids don't have Facebook. They are on Instagram, they are, okay, but they don't tweet. Tweet is for older generation, 55 plus. So you have to find the real approaches and the real methods to different age groups, to different older, younger, different sexes. You have to be very creative, but you have to listen to people, what they want and how do they want you to talk to them and to inform them. 95% of all cyber operations or successful cyber operations are because of human mistakes. 95%, which means that there's a lot we have to do with raising awareness. And today when we were having coffee, when I receive the update, I don't update immediately. It's so easy to me to push the button, remind me later. That's not right. And I think myself pretty aware person about cybersecurity. So very easy steps that we have to take.
Marina, can I also ask you for a short reflection on community policing in Estonia and this service that you have there?
As a matter of fact, I'm not so familiar with that, and I'm sorry to say that. You know more than I do. But I think then it's a good thing that I don't know about it. It means it's working and it's operational. But I'm really sorry, I don't know the details.
Thank you. Ambassador Keefe, regional cooperation.
How
to synchronize better?
Yes. I think there's a real issue with all cooperation, with all projects and programs, and that is, are you genuinely being strategic? Are you making an intervention that is going to help take things forward? And it's one of the things we agonize over most. The head of my programs team is sitting there, and it's an issue he regularly badgers me about. So there's one thing this is about our own analysis and our own strategy. And in the last few days, I've done a number of things on our cooperation with Serbia in the e-government area. But one, as you mentioned it yesterday, I think we were starting a project on open data. Now that one I think really is strategic, because open data is one of these things, if you get it right, that builds trust. And in the long run can have an enormous impact on whether or not e-government approaches work. If you'll forgive me, there's one example about trust which I just want to use because I think it is important. So again, it's on voting. In the UK, we vote with pencil and paper, and we don't. But and we don't have to identify ourselves at the polling station. Well, it's bad as soon as someone exploits it. At the moment, thank heaven, we trust our system. And as you know, there is a really important point here. The system that works is the one that people trust. A lot of people find they have to have very sophisticated systems, but at the moment, we trust that one. But then on the regional. The regional thing, yes, of course, coordination is difficult. You have to put effort into it. That there is a temptation for any government that's engaged in financial cooperation to just get on with it. It's complicated enough as it is doing it yourself. But again, we try to compare notes with other partners to work out what we're doing. We try to explain our programs. Our most important one in Serbia is the Good Governance Fund, which has spent about 7 million euros on cooperation with Serbia in the last couple of years. That we think is getting to the strategic level, but we know we have more to do. I'll just add one word, if I may, on organised crime, because, of course, a great deal of our cooperation with the Serbian Ministry of the Interior is on organised crime. I wanted to approach the subject today through the prism of trust. But there is a very important crime prism. As the Minister said, the use of cyberspace by criminals whose main interest is not cyberspace. They don't mind. They just want to use the most effective techniques to smuggle people or weapons or drugs or cigarettes. All of these are big issues in the Balkans, and issues in the Balkans that have real impact on life, on finances in the UK. So for us, the cooperation with Serbia and countries in the region is extremely important.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Minister, last word is on your home territory. Mr. Radunović asked the question of how to connect, a strong mid-level, expert professional networking that's happening with the region, with the political level, and what, maybe your ideas as a minister who meets other ministers would be in this, and then any other final remarks you want to make would be welcome.
Well, that was the good question, because we've been working very closely also with the OSCE mission here in Serbia, with the United Kingdom, Swedish government, DCAF, many other institutions, just how to overcome the obstacles of, let's say, institutions being afraid to cooperate or having lack of trust. And for example, we have still an issue of domestic violence in this country. And one of the good examples of building capacity was putting a judge, a prosecutor, and a police officer together with the ministers in the same room for the education. And we were there, of course, as a support, but the judge was able to say, well, this wouldn't go. This cannot happen. If you do this, it won't stand on court. And the prosecutor said, well, I need you to do this in order for me to have a good evidence. So the police officer knew how to collect evidence and how to approach very complicated situations. Because legally, looking at some of the aspects of these specific type of crimes, which are very, very emotional always, is how you actually get out of the situation, protect the victim, which was most important thing, but then have enough when you go to court that you have a conviction. So these kind of things reminded me always that you need to take, that's why I'm proud and that's I'm very grateful to our colleagues from the ministry that they are here today to be able to tell me what I've said wrong after we are finished. And what are the things that we can improve? Having regular meetings and pushing, actually that's one of the main roles that I think the ministry can do, is keep on pushing and pounding until you get the things done. I mean, just letting it, someone else will do it, it won't happen. You know, you need to be involved yourself and at least know enough that you need, whether your people need more support, more financial support, more education, or anything else. That's important first step. And of course, working regionally, sometimes people set the real goal aside and deal with the political issues, which are, let's say, more tempting because they get to be more emotional. As you said, I will take this as your possible, that you will possibly apply for our citizenship. You said you want to vote for us. But putting this aside, you know, sometimes people cannot take the focus of the very important things. Sometimes cybersecurity will not raise so many emotions in Serbia. People will not say, well, this is the most important topic of the day. Where was it so until now? But it doesn't mean that we don't have to push it. Our job is to do it. Our job is to make sure that maybe they don't see it today because we are not living in such an advanced world today, and not everything is done on the internet. But it will be done maybe in 5 or 10 years from now. So we cannot say, well, we should have done it 10 years ago. And I heard a very excellent Chinese saying when they said, and I'm quoting it frequently, said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So this is what I think can be done in a way to advance cooperation, to have full and constant engagement with the people of all ranks, not saying, well, this is ministerial rank, this is my rank, I don't care about what. So all ranks, and to keep pushing. Sometimes people are not seeing the same things which other people see. So it doesn't hurt to listen from time to time, and I'm trying to do it as often as possible. So this is what I think can be done.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think the ministry has planted a tree about, at the beginning of your mandate, there are some very important developments in the ministry. I think the Serbian government as a whole will certainly profit from this in developing its cybersecurity resilience government-wide. I'm grateful to you all for your attention, and I promise that in a year's time we'll be discussing cybersecurity again at the Belgrade Security Forum, maybe drawing lessons, maybe bringing some other countries of the region to say, you know, how this regional agenda can progress, because again, as you said, a lot of attacks and a lot of problems come from within the region, and I think we as a region need to therefore join forces to deal with them. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, and thank you for your attention.